So we're in Advanced Steel 2023 and we're going to take a look at the PowerPack for Advanced Steel from GRAITEC, and in particular we're going to focus upon some new tools that are in the Create Elements panel. For this session, the multi-grid level tool. Activating this tool will introduce a grid pattern into the model and open a GUI dialog. Within this dialog, the user can make entries in these fields to affect the overall grid length of each axis in each direction. Similarly, they can affect how many axes they see in each direction. Also, they can influence the numbering and lettering by changing the labeling here. Also, with options to add prefix and suffix elements and enable edging or ballooning, as some people term it. If we swatch to the next tab, we can see here that the grids have been evenly spaced by the number of axes available. By entering a value in here, you can actually change the measurement between the grid, and you can see that the next grid axis has increased. Similarly, if you want to lock a value between two grids, you can do so in here and then change this value in here, for example. So if we put a value in there, we can see that this cell is reduced because we locked all the others. If you just open the cell a little bit to the right, you can see the label says grid lock. So you can use that to influence and move individual grids within an overall sequence. I'm just going to take those off a minute. I'm going to change this from the fixed grid length to adjustable grid length. If we now come in here and say, let's make a figure quite a large change. And if you watch this bottom cell here, you'll see that the overall grid axis is now increased in length. So what we're actually doing is we're affecting the overall length. It's not being constrained by the checkbox, we've allowed it to be adjustable. So similarly in here we can enter suitable figures that we may require to return the grid to a size that's needed. Each time the grid is adjusted as we enter values within the cell. Another nice feature to look out for is we have a switch to change from X positive to X negative, flipping the grid about that axis, and similarly on the Y. And obviously the two can be used in combination together if so needed. Just returning to the X grid here and putting it back into the positive position, we can see the next element available here, which is a model view. Checking that turns a model view on here and also enables a camera option. The camera option is referenced to the inbuilt automatic join creation feature that you see within model views. Checking the boxes turns these views on and off. So we're just going to do the two extreme edges of the building, which would form the elevations, and we're going to activate the cameras. And similarly, we'll do the same on the Y-axis. You can obviously do intermediate ones if you so wish, just activating them and turning them on. Turning them on and off will also, they will be removed from the current views available. We come to the next tab, which is about creating levels. Activating this checkbox will give the user the option to have positive and negative levels about the zero elevation in the model. So in this case, I'm going to remove the negative levels, turning it to 0, and I'm going to increase the positive levels within the model space. We can now see that this has introduced a level symbol into the model as well. Also, you can affect this level similar to how we worked with the grids. So we can change this level and it will move in the model. So it's not necessarily that all the levels would be identical within a building structure, but obviously some of them are typically very similar. But you have the ability to adjust this in a positive or negative direction. Similarly, you can use the tool to create model views around each one of those levels. and in turn obviously create all the camera views as well associated with that. This method is called grid replication. You will also notice within the dialog there's a checkbox that says projected grid. This is a new functionality available only in the 2023 version from Autodesk, and we've enabled a checkbox here to allow you to use grid projection. And we can see that's influenced what you see visually in the model. The levels have remained in place and the model views, but obviously the grid is not currently seen as projected. That is controlled by use of the Project Explorer. So as we've been creating these within this dialog, and if we just come over here, we can see the Project Explorer. This is available from the Home tab of the Advanced Steel ribbon. Under here, if we expand out, we can actually see while we've been working inside the macro, it has populated the dialog here with the various views that we created and also the levels that we've created within the model space. Because we're using the projected view, you can't actually see the level unless you activate it. So within here, we activate a couple of these views, you can see that the grids are now appearing at their projected position using that. This is standard functionality available within Advanced Steel for the 2023 version. If we just make it all visible again, and if we come back in here, we can also make this appear as a projected grid within a model view. At that point, the grid is actually projected to the underside of the model view. Again, this is a standard operational feature of Advanced Steel 2023. Also, even though we've created all those elements, we may need to come back into the dialog. This can be done by accessing the shortcut menu here and the contextual menu button here. We've now re-entered the dialog. If we come back to the levels and say we didn't want to use projected grids, but actually swap back to use the normal replicated grid, we could do so. Closing that dialog, we're back out again and we're back in the model space. Similarly, you can attach elements to a particular level within a model. So if we were to activate this level, you would just see it there. But more importantly, if you were to actually physically turn it on so it became an active level, and that again is a standard function that it orientates the model to that view. What we can do now is we can come in and we can draw a particular beam at a point in the model. I'm snapping to it in the plan view. I'm bringing up its properties, adjusting its position so the system line is at the top. And if I just rotate the model around, you can see that the beam is placed upon that level, not the level below. More importantly, the beam is actually attached to that level. We can indicate that by the marking. So we can see that the beam is now marked, it's attached to this level. If I just turn everything on to be all visible again, we can see the rest of the grid around that. So if we come in here now and come back again to the contextual menu, coming back in here, coming back to the levels, we may choose that we want to change this level in the model. So maybe we decide that it needs to move up, so we adjust it. With that, the beam moves, being that it is attached to the level. Similar, we may decide to move it down. Again, this is making use of the standard functionality that's available within Advanced Steel to attach elements to levels and allow you to work in that manner that allows multiple story buildings and attachment of beams to allow ease of movement and in use of corresponding steel connections. Another element I just wanted to point out is obviously we created all these model views earlier on and we didn't really come back and have a look at that. So let's just take a pop into those dialogues and take a look at what's going on. So under here you can see this checkbox is enabled. That means the automatic drawing creation functionality was checked when we click the camera button inside the main. grid dialog that we were using. So the user can come in and set the camera type, write a description in here, whichever one they particularly want to use. They can also set in here the drawing style. So all the functionality that you would normally do within Advanced Steel, they would come in here and they could carry on setting those values within the dialog. Similarly, if you want to show the camera, you can obviously show the camera graphic, and that applies to all of them here. So for example, if we pick this one on the opposing side of the building, and we can actually see that the view direction is wrong. So we can change the default view direction. So again, this is a standard kind of workflow that you would see in Advanced Steel. You may have replicated the view, copied it across to the other end of the building, and flipped the camera to the opposite side. This allows for the drawing creation process to continue after you've finished placing all the cameras, and obviously at any point during the modelling of the complete structure, you can quickly create a drawing using the camera processes that are available in your particular installation. They are slightly different depending on which country you are within. So that's a very quick walkthrough of the basic elements and the basic operations of the multi-grid level tool from GRAITEC that comes as part of the Create Elements panel under the PowerPack ribbon for the 2023 version, allowing for grid replication and also the use of projected grids.